Alright, let's check out what's going on with Smooth Love Potion. So before I start this video, just very quickly, I did just record a technical analysis video on what is going on with Axie Infinity. Obviously these two cryptocurrencies are linked and they do have a very similar chart, so if you did want analysis on Axie Infinity as well, check out my channel, I do provide both. That is all, no intros on this channel, so let's jump right into the analysis. So let's actually start off on the higher time frames and then we'll work our way down. So number one, the last video we made, we basically talked about, your macro signals that you've got. So zooming out, we're clearly in a huge downtrend. That's absolutely not debatable. You've got your all-time high, lower high, and while we're doing this, you've got lows, and quite recently we've broken down into lower lows. If I can adjust this, you can see this low down here, we've made new lows down here. So the macro trend is very bearish for SLP. I just flattened my data so hard. 1 second. But yeah, as you can see, zooming out on the daily and focusing on more what's been going on in the mid time frame, we were building up momentum, consolidating within this asymmetrical triangle. We broke to the downside. We tried to come up and retest. We didn't even manage to pull up for a retest. So SLP is showing extreme weakness right now. Based on the most recent impulse from low to high, you are below your 786 Fibonacci and on the daily time frame with weekly closes below it. So technically this whole bullish pattern that we've had to the upside is now invalidated, and we still are in a macro bearish trend. This being invalidated just means the micro and midterm trend is also bearish as well. So with this as well, lower high, it's honestly not looking the best for SLP. I mean, since the Ronin hack and kind of like the buy the rumor sell the news with the Origins update on Axie Infinity, Axie and SLP collectively have not been doing too well, and I guess that makes sense when, I can't remember what the exact number was it 600 or 900 million stolen from the Ronin network? That's obviously going to leave a sour taste in investors' mouths. I do think we are nearing the bottom for SLP for a multitude of reasons. I talked about this in yesterday's video on my Bitcoin video, but the Bitcoin logarithmic growth curves, Bitcoin is literally down at the lowest Fibonacci band before we come down to one deviation oversold, which historically is where we always bottom. So I think Bitcoin's near a bottom, and Bitcoin being near a bottom is probably going to mean that your altcoins are coming near to the bottom. So if we look at your oscillators, starting with your money flow indicator, the money flow recently came down to 7. The lowest we've ever been was 4. So, we're very near, if not already at the bottom, in my opinion. And as we are coming down a little bit right now, I do think this retest in the lower time frames we could be setting up for. We drew this. This is basically the most recent impulse you've got. Obviously you've got a huge downtrend. This was a fairly decent impulse. However, we can't be too bullish on this right now. In theory, I would personally like your 618 Fibonacci to hold on this most recent impulse, meaning that SLP, if you do want to remain super bullish, 1205 cents should hold. Now, the trend is not over if we do break below that level, so bear in mind, and I do think we are going to get chopped around for the next couple of days or so. So I do think it is potential that we could come down once again to your 786 Fib at 1144. From a technical perspective, if we did break below this 786, at which point the micro trend would be invalidated. However, I really wouldn't put it past it to come down, maybe have a double bottom on this trend line, because this is a very important trend line. We'll get to that in a second. So really, I'm looking for SLP to stay above 1 cent. If it breaks below 1 cent, then it's coming below your lows down here. It's making new lows, so it's breaking into price discovery on the downside. And then also it's lost this trend line. If we come over to the daily before we once again hop down to our lower time frames, you can see if we connect this low with this low, you do technically have a higher low, which is something we have not necessarily done on SLP for quite some time. I mean, potentially you could draw something like this, and then it would be the situation where, you've got your low, and then you've gone on a rally. We didn't hold our 786 down here, so you went down, double back tested the trend line. This would be the triple back test, which is kind of akin to what we're doing right now, except this is the first time we've back tested it. And, at this moment in time, we're seeing a slight bounce and we're coming back down to this trend line. So this trend line absolutely needs to hold. If you, and by the trend line I'm talking about needing to hold, I'm talking about this one down here, because you can see, you know, you've got the low, you've got a higher low, and you've got a mark up and a mark down. This is exactly what we saw before we broke down into new lows before. You can see, you know, we came down to the trend line, you had our rally, we did whatever we wanted to do, then we came back, you had a bounce, and then when it came down to the lower time frames, when it came down to holding your 786, you know, the second you lost the 786, it was a straight wick down, broke through the floorboards of the previous, could I call this an accumulation range? It didn't really seem like too much accumulation. Really before the past sideways movement, before we broke the lows, we came down. So I'd really be looking for Smooth Love Potion to absolutely hold this 1 cent vicinity. If we do not hold this, then a breakdown, and bear in mind I'm not talking about the breakdown from where we are right now, I'm talking about what happens if we come down, backtest the trend line, and then don't bounce out of here. Then you can see this is a 20% decrease to the downside. Not from where we are now, from where the breakdown is. This would be 27 to 28% away from where we are right now. Like I said, your oscillators, your money flow indicator, your relative strength index, they're extremely oversold right now. However, that does not mean that SLP and Axie can't go down collectively, because they still can. We are showing extreme weakness in the market, whether you're looking at the lower time frames, whether you're looking at the higher time frames, we're clearly finding weakness. In the macro time frame, we've already been through how, you know, the trend is your friend. We're clearly in a wham downtrend for SLP in the macro term. And even in the short term, since the most recent, you know, mid to, I wouldn't want to call this a macro impulse, because this, in my opinion, was, I guess you could call it a mid impulse. I'd maybe call this a macro impulse. But yeah, this impulse that we've just seen right now really seems to be something running in the shorter term time frames. And if we look at this on the 4 hour, you can see ever since these 4 hourly EMAs flipped bearish, we've been in a downtrend. These 4 hourly EMAs have perfectly characterized the downtrend. Every time, you know, we've been stuck underneath these. Every time you try and flip these, you poke your head above the long-term moving average, you go for the back test, you fail. You completely fall through the long-term moving average on the back test. And it's the exact same as what we did, you know, only a day or two ago. You know, this was 2 days ago. We poked our head above the long-term moving average on your 4 hourly EMAs. We came down to back test it, we completely failed. We fell through it like a rock, came up, resistance, fell through the table. So it's honestly not looking the greatest for SLP right now, and I would not be looking to try and catch the falling knife on this trade. Really, in my opinion, you know, you can scratch the short-term moving averages on this. I'm honestly not too worried about the 786. It's this trend line, because this trend line absolutely needs to hold. And if you want, you know, to assume that SLP is going to break super bullish, then a break down below 1143 would kind of invalidate that. So I'd really be looking to hold anywhere between this green box that I will now mark on the screen. If we do break below there, you know, the lows are coming into play, which is a 27% drop from where we are now, a 19% breakdown, and at which point it just wouldn't be looking good. So one more thing before we do wrap up the video. I talked about this in the last SLP video. This is really something for those of you who are newer to my channel, who have just found my channel, or for those of you who just maybe need a reminder, because I feel like, you know, I need to say this every altcoin video, because this is going to be super important to the price. Now, in my opinion, in the past week or so, it's not really my opinion, I mean, it's fact that Bitcoin has been trending down / sideways. But however, it is my opinion that we are downtrending downwards and sideways for one specific reason. The next Federal Reserve meeting is right here on the 4th of May. It will be wrapped up on the 4th of May, at the absolute latest the 5th of May. So we've got between 24 to 48 hours until the next Federal Reserve meeting. In my opinion, the price action is going to go lower. It's going to be choppy until we get into this Fed meeting. So, you know, I would not be surprised if SLP did something like this. But we do come down in the short term, you know, whether we bounce on your 786 and get out of here, or whether we have to come back and test the trend line, is yet to be seen. But we absolutely need to hold this green box right here. If we break below it, we've got much lower price targets. And, you know, this 20% is really only the cherry on the top of the cake, because if we take out this low, you know, it's not going to be good. Let me show you what happened the last time we took out the last low. So this was your last low. You can see as soon as you took it over, and I'm sure a lot of people were thinking at 5 cent, you know, surely SLP can't go down much further. And this is on the daily time frame, so literally within 48 hours we went down 40%. So this is absolutely not a joke. From this low as well, yeah, I mean, these two lows were pretty well lined up, so maybe you just got a little bit of extra euphoria from the bears as we were breaking down below 2 trend lines. But the point of the matter is, you do not want to take out floors. And as of the moment in time, we are hovering just above that floor. So I'm not going to be looking to dollar cost average right now. I do think SLP at some point is going to be a really good long trade. However, I am not the biggest fan of SLP in the long term, and I'll tell you the one and sole reason why. It's got terrible tokenomics. So I do believe SLP, like I've been in SLP for a while, and I've seen a lot of the times, you know, when people start talking about it, we go on these euphoric rallies, and don't get me wrong, I want to be part of these rallies. This is why I cover SLP, because I believe that at some point it's going to be a great long-term trade. And I think, you know, again, another 3-4x run up in a couple of days could definitely be underway for SLP. However, for the long term, if you plan on holding this for the long term, I think you really need to read the Axie Infinity white paper if you haven't already. I talk about this in my SLP videos just for those of you who maybe don't read white papers, who don't read white papers before you invest, etc. I definitely recommend briefly read through the Axie Infinity white paper. It is one of the quickest and easiest to read white papers I've ever read. I've read pretty much every white paper of every crypto that I've ever invested in, and the Axie Infinity white paper will literally take you, bang, 5 minutes to read through, you'll be done. It will talk about the inflationary tokenomics of SLP. A lot of people think the more players come into SLP, the more adoption that Axie Infinity gets, or the more players in Axie Infinity rather, then the better the price of the SLP will be. But that's not how it works, because the more players playing Axie Infinity, the more inflation there is in SLP. So I'm bringing fundamentals in a technical analysis video. However, I did just think that is something that is very important to know if you are invested in SLP for the long term. I do want to provide value for my subscribers. I do definitely recommend, if you are considering investing in SLP for the long term, to check out the fundamentals by reading the Axie Infinity white paper. And then I think this downslide that we've been seeing will make a lot more sense, because I'm telling you, you know, you look at your money flow indicator, the money flow indicator was bullish while this was dropping like a rock. What does that mean? That when money is not flowing out of your crypto, but the price is dumping. What does that mean? If no one's selling the crypto, if all of the money is flowing in while the price is going down, it's a supply issue. There's too much supply of SLP. So that's really all I wanted to run through. Like I said, I don't want to make this a fundamental analysis video. Don't get me wrong. I do somewhat like trading Axie and SLP. I would just be very cautious if you're planning on hodling SLP for the long term. The more players that come in the ecosystem, the more SLP they print. That is definitely something you need to know. So back to the analysis, wrapping up the video. Keep your eyes on 1 cent. If 1 cent falls, if we break below this green box, like I said, I mean, we really only have, you know, a 20% drop. I guess we've got a 1.618 fib down here, so we could potentially move down 23%. But like I said, looking at the last time you took out the low, I would not want to be an SLP holder if we did once again take out the low, because we really downslided very, very quickly. So that's all I've got for Smooth Love Potion. Once again, at some point, this is going to be the greatest long of all time. However, we do need to be cautious. Coming into the Fed meeting, it's only another 24 to 48 hours. I'm going to hold my horses. I'm going to get back in bed. I'm definitely not getting out of bed until the Fed meeting's done. That's all I've got for SLP. As always, cowboy out, not financial advice. Peace.